Welcome to the Super Subs with
Andrew
and Harry, where we talk about anything and everything related to football. So today's episode, we're actually going to talk about cards. So penalty cards, as they're officially called, but usually you'll hear them as yellow cards and red cards in football. So the official topic today is, how did cards get introduced in football? We're not going to only talk about the history of cards, but we're also going to define what cards are and when they get shown, and then also the purpose of cards in football. Before we do that, Andrew, what are you drinking today? How have you been so far? What's been up with you?
Yeah, we're good. It's pretty uncharacteristic weather here in the Bay Area. We've got snow all around us in the foothills and mountains. I call them mountains, but I realize people, around the world and, even in the States have a lot higher mountains, but
yeah.
We'll call them mountains, but there's a lot of snow around. So it's nothing at my level here in the city, but definitely pretty cold. And right now we are drinking, I'm back at it with the ginger beer. I'm hooked on this stuff, man. It's so tasty.
Love it.
So we are cruising with the ginger beer. How about you? What's going on?
Ironically, I'm also drinking the kombucha. So again, the mango passion fruit kombucha.
Yeah.
Love that stuff. So it's funny because in college, I first drank kombucha and I thought it was the most disgusting thing ever. And I think what I actually confused it with was yerba mate. So I remember
I love yerba mate.
I know. So, and I grew to like it over time. What the yerba mate I think I had was the one that was really bitter and not sweet at all. Ones that are unsweetened, the ones that are super bitter, really infused with that yerba mate. I guess it's tea, right? It's like kind of
it's
herbs
super
and tea.
earthy.
Yeah, super
drink
earthy,
it out
right?
of the gourd.
Exactly, out of the gourd. Cavani drinks it. We've got Messi. We've got all the Argentinians drinking it. But kombucha, I've discovered over time, especially hard kombucha and spike kombucha, are super tasty. But this one's a less sugar but very tasty mango kombucha. So I've been sipping on this a lot. And it's also great for gut health. So making sure my stomach doesn't ache. I eat also a lot of spicy foods, so I feel like I tend to get a lot of stomach aches. So I counteract that by drinking a lot of kombucha.
There you go.
All right, so let's get right into it today. So how did cards get introduced in football? Before we get into the history of cards, though, Andrew, give us the rundown of the definition of different cards in football. We have two main cards, Andrew. What are those two, and what do those do?
Yeah, so we've got two main cards. We've got a yellow and we got a red. So essentially the yellow card is given as a caution or a warning. So it lets the players know, or even the coaches. Coaches can get cards too.
Did not know that. There we go.
Yeah, so if the coach is mouthing off at the ref or interfering with the game, they can get cards as well. So it lets the people receiving them know that you could stay on the pitch, the field, for the remainder of the game, but you've been warned for whatever you're acting out as, So, hey, watch out. You get another yellow, you're done. You're off the field. So
two yellows equals an ejection.
Exactly. Two yellows equals a red. So a red is used in several different sporting codes, but it essentially, and its meaning can differ among sports, but it's most commonly used to indicate a serious offense. And most often, and this is the case in football, it means that you're permanently ejected from the game. You're kicked out, you're ejected, suspended. Sent off is a popular term as well. And it's pretty embarrassing, but essentially you've committed an offense that's so bad that the referee believes that you should no longer be in the game due to what you've done, and you have to head to the locker room. So, and it provides a significant disadvantage. So, you go down a player, and that means it is pretty hard to stay in the game at that point. So it's a big deal.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of cards then, in that case. So we've got the yellow card, we've got the red card, and it's interesting that these colors are very similar to something that we may see a lot in our daily lives as a human, especially if you are of driving age or over. You might know that a stoplight in your country, it might be vertical, horizontal. It might have 4 lights, it might have 3. There's obviously all kinds of stoplights around the world, but usually ubiquitously around the world you have a red a green and a yellow, or some form of that as a signal to go or stop, right? So really, the way that the cards or penalty cards, red cards and yellow cards, made their debut was at the 1970 World Cup, actually. And the reason this is because it was a direct result of experiences in a 1966 World Cup match between England and Argentina. So pretty much the concept of cards as a booking or a sending off, the reason that they were created is because of an altercation that happened between that England and Argentina game in 1966 at that World Cup, which resulted in actually the Argentinian captain being sent off during that game. And also during that game, Bobby and Jack Charlton, who were part of the English football team playing against Argentina, found out afterwards that they had been booked, but they didn't even know that it had happened during the game. So there was a huge altercation. The referee told several players, "You're booked, you're booked, you're booked, you're sent off, you're booked, you're booked, you're booked." And when we say the term that you've been booked, or when the ref says to a player you've been booked, that means they've written them down literally into their book. And you'll see refs actually during games, during a live broadcast, writing in their notebook usually the number of a player and their offense, or they'll write down some notes during the game, etc. So literally, if you go in a ref's book, you've been booked, and it's some kind of warning, or maybe a red card, or yellow card, etc. So it came out of the reason that players didn't even know that they've been booked or sent off, etc. So really, the idea of using colored cards came out of a referee called Ken Aston. He's an English referee, and Ken Aston had actually been appointed to the FIFA Referees Committee at the 1966 World Cup. So leading into the 1970 World Cup, he was able to make decisions that led to implementing the cards. So Andrew, talk a little bit more about what Aston did, what Ken Aston implemented during the 1970 World Cup.
Yeah, so as you said, the big impetus was obviously people not really knowing what was going on. So Ken Aston, as you mentioned, was thinking about ways that it could be more apparent for the players and the spectators to understand what was happening, who was being cautioned or given a yellow card, and who was being ejected. So, using that color scheme that we have, which is pretty brilliant for traffic, he was able to come up with the red and the yellow system. And essentially, it just created this very iconic and easy way for players and fans to understand what was happening in the game. It was used for the first time in the 1970 FIFA World Cup in Mexico. And since then, it's been really a staple of the game. And in fact, the use of penalty cards has been adopted and expanded by several sporting codes. So, each sport adopting, the idea in a different way into a different set of rules or laws. But, those colors are, often seen. I don't know if there's a direct correlation, but in American football, you get yellow flags thrown, which are cautions and often indicate penalties. So I don't know if there's any actual correlation between that, but
yeah.
Needless to say, it's become a big part of the game. So, when we think about, so we have the definition, we have the history. Mm-hmm. Harry, can you walk us through a little bit more about what's the purpose? Like why even have cards, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously bookings existed long before cards in football, right? So as a semi-contact sport, so football is one of those sports that it's obviously not full contact, where you're not literally wrestling people to the ground or punching people and, throwing people to the ground. But also there is shoulder-to-shoulder contact. You can have contact that's legal, where you're in a contest for the ball and you don't directly injure someone or try to purposely, kick out at someone without touching the ball, because, you're always going to be able to accidentally knock into people, etc. So the yellow and red cards signify levels of penalties or infractions that a player can be given. So a yellow card is a little bit more like a warning, like Andrew said. It's not as severe as a red card, but it usually signifies unsportsmanlike behavior. Dissent, so this could be dissent against the ref or dissent against other players. It could be, you're disrespecting other players with your words, with your body, etc., or the ref, you're yelling at the ref and you're giving him too much and gives you a yellow card. Maybe a repeated infringement of the rules, such as some players even get yellow cards if they don't take a free kick fast enough, or if they wait too long, they're time wasting, they can get a yellow card. They maybe leave the field or re-enter the field without the ref's permission, they can get a yellow card. So all of those things are not as serious, obviously, as what Andrew's going to go into, but they are still infractions that a ref has every right to give a yellow card to a player for. So Andrew, on to the red card. This might be the one that's a little bit more interesting to folks to actually see given out. Obviously, it involves a lot more drama. So Andrew, what are some infractions that will cause players to receive a red card for these various purposes?
Yeah, so to receive a red card, I mean, it's a pretty serious infringement. You're being sent to the locker room. You're exiting the field effective immediately. So to earn a red card, you're being guilty of serious foul play or violent conduct. You see this a lot when people go for slide tackles and take people out in a dangerous way, or they go studs up. So they take their cleats and turn them up so that the cleat goes directly into that player's leg or part of the body. Spitting on people, denying the opposing team a goal or obvious goal-scoring opportunity by deliberately handling the ball. We've seen this a number of times throughout history. Denying an obvious goal-scoring opportunity to an opponent moving towards the player's goal by an offense punishable by a free kick or penalty kick. So they've blazed past you and you're running after them and you just take out their knees or whatever, that would be, an automatic red, or using offensive or insulting or abusive language. So absolutely, there's no tolerance for any of that. And you can be ejected. And that includes coaches as well and coaching staff.
Wow.
So if the coaches are being offensive or abusive in any way, they can be sent off the field as well. And the rules can vary from competition to competition, but accumulation of red cards and yellow cards. So a red card will often mean that you're suspended for at least one game following. Depending on how serious it is, it can last multiple games. There's a player for Manchester United that was recently suspended for a few games.
3 games,
after putting his hand on an opposing player's neck during an altercation between teams, and ultimately, you could say what you want about the rules. It looked fairly harmless, but you got to abide by the rules. But an accumulation of yellow cards can actually lead to suspension as well. So if you're getting yellow cards every game, too many of those will lead to suspension as well. It's generally advised to try to avoid those things, obviously. But it's funny though, because we were talking as well. There's some other sports that have these cards as well. So we've seen it in badminton, volleyball, handball, fencing, field hockey, water polo, and I'm sure that there are others. It's pretty crazy to think about how cards are such a common, sporting regulation now. Right. I mean, it's pretty interesting. And, they're actually, so we were coming across this as well, Harry, there's this thing called a white card. What the heck is a white card?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to guess it if I was just a bystander. You were asking me, so you got a yellow card, you got a red card. There's also a white card. What's a white card? Obviously, there's no white color on a stoplight. You wouldn't know what to do. I would just get out of my car and walk home if that was the case, if a stoplight showed me white. So a white card in football is it's pretty much a new card that's being pioneered and tested out. I believe this was recently in a women's league, I believe, maybe in Portugal. And it's actually meant to improve the ethical value in sports. So if there's anyone that does any player or any staff on the side of the pitch that does something in a sportsman-like manner, so helps a player up or protects a player from maybe a foul or makes sure to keep the rules of the game intact, etc., and the ref feels like they've gone above and beyond for that, a ref can give a white card, and I believe this is being tested out in the Portuguese league. It's interesting because Andrew and I were doing a little bit of research on this, and we couldn't find any outcome to a white card. So obviously a yellow card, if you get 2 yellows, it's a red, right? A red card, you're automatically suspended for the next game at least, and you get sent off the field right away. A white card, it seems like you get a clap, and that's pretty much it. There should be some kind of monetary compensation, right? Or at least, the game stops for 30 seconds and everyone shouts your name or something for 30 seconds straight. There should be some kind of, you should get a little bit of something for getting a white card, but obviously maybe it's just in the trial run. So there's no reward, no compensation yet. But if they're doing something like this, it shouldn't be for nothing. Otherwise, there's no reason for a player just to do something nice, just to get shown a white card. The satisfaction in seeing a white card given to you is not enough to keep doing good deeds. It's usually just out of the goodness of your own heart, right? So it's interesting. So one more fun fact, actually, before we close. This was a fairly quick episode today. So a fun fact in the fastest red card ever received by a professional football player. So this happened actually, I believe, in September of 2022 in Ligue 1, which is the highest league in France, between OGC Nice and another team, I believe. But this player called Todibo, I'm not sure if they're a defender or anything. I believe they are. But the game literally just kicked off. So ref blows the whistle, and the other team starts. I believe it's Angers or Angiers, and they kick the ball up, and they are in Nice's defensive half, and they're in on goal. And Todibo actually in the first 5 seconds is the last man. So I talked about the term last man in the most 23 common terms used in football 2 pods ago. And last man, if just to rehash the term, is if you are literally the last person between the attacker and your own goal, you are the last man standing. And usually if you make a tackle or you bring the attacker down without getting the ball, that's an automatic red card offense. And in this case, Jean-Claire Todibo was the last man and brought the attacker down, and it was the fastest red card. 5 seconds, blow the whistle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Brought his man down, he's off. Can you believe playing a match for 5 seconds and then getting sent off? That's just insane. You don't even have time to think, or I guess Todibo wasn't thinking. He was just trying to take one for the team. I have to see the highlights because I actually haven't watched the video of it yet, but after we watch the video, Andrew and I can give our take on Twitter of whether or not Todibo should have stopped that goal from happening or not. But sometimes it is necessary, but usually you'll only see those tackles in the dying embers of a game. So in the 80th, 5th, 85th, 88th, 90th, 93rd minute of a game, usually if you're drawn or if you're, 1 goal up and you have to get, stop them from scoring, usually the last man will make the tackle. But that early on in the game, there's no reason to do that. Usually you can claw your way back. I don't think Todibo was thinking there. So that's the fastest red card ever in football history, 5 seconds. So with that, let's transition out of this podcast. Andrew, give us your closing thoughts on penalty cards, things that our listener who's listening right now should look out for, and just thoughts on how cards are used.
Yeah, cards have been used for a long time now, and we're seeing them being used now in an interesting way where technology is getting involved. So you can get like retroactive cards, which is pretty crazy after video review. Yep. So definitely keep your eye out for how giving cards has changed. It's definitely a super interesting facet of the game now that we have a lot more technology. So it's continually changing. Who knows, for the better, hopefully for the better. I don't know. It's anyone's guess, but yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And to add to that, what Andrew said was very true. So the player that we were talking about previously, Casemiro, the card that he actually got, the red card, was a retroactive video action replay or video action review, or referee or video assistant referee reviewed the video and saw that Casemiro was putting his hands more around the collarbone. Obviously, we're both United fans, so a little bit biased, but around the collarbone of the, I believe, was it Crystal Palace or some other?
Yeah, I think it was Palace, maybe Anderson or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it looked like he was choking him out, but that's video action replay. And when you slow things down, things always look a little bit different than when they're in full speed.
Yeah.
What I would say about cards are, I would say they're a great innovation. So the ref, Aston, that created this color coding scheme for yellow, red cards, I would say this is a great addition to the game. It's necessary. You need to penalize players for things that they do. What I would say as a listener, thinking about cards and penalties and fouls and free kicks and things like that, refs have different styles. So lately, a year or two ago, I believe in the past year, especially in the Premier League and leagues all around the world, FIFA has given a communication to refs to actually let football and the play and flow of football be a little bit more physical and rough. So I would say 3 or 4 years ago, there were more fouls called. The game wasn't flowing as much. Even little things like little shoves or little, nudges or body checks were called. And now, especially this season, refs are not blowing their whistle as much and letting play go on. And it's really interesting to see the evolution of the game and what each referee deems as a foul, because ultimately rules are very subjective. Reading out the rules again, unsportsmanlike behavior, that's a very large category. And then what Andrew talked about for a red card, a serious foul or violent conduct, etc. So those things, if you step on someone's boot accidentally and you're going for the ball, one ref could interpret that as intentional and give a yellow card or a red card, whereas another ref's like, okay, play on, that was accidental, or let's just give a foul, drop ball, let's keep the play going, etc. So every ref has their own style, and good refs, I think this is something to note as the listener, good refs know exactly when to book and when not to book, because you can't let the game get out of hand and let the players dictate the game. You have to impose yourself as the ref, your authority on the game, but you can't do that too early. If you give out 12 yellows and 5 reds, you are just power hungry and everyone's going to hate you because you made yourself the star of the show. So you have to have that fine balance between knowing when to penalize and put your stamp on the game and when to let the game flow and keep going. So I would say being a referee, at the end of the story, the TLDR that I have, being a referee is very hard. So we give them a lot of grief and a lot of abuse nowadays, too much, especially in the social media age. It's very hard. But at the same time, obviously, sometimes refs are human. They are human all the time, and sometimes they make mistakes as well. So definitely have to keep that in mind. But that was today's episode of the Super Subs with
Andrew
and Harry. Definitely don't miss our next episode. We're hoping to have some guests on. We're going to keep our topic secret for now, but we are going to have hopefully a guest or two on to discuss our next topic. Definitely stay tuned. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a good rating if you liked us. And then if you're listening to us on Spotify on your commute or Apple Music or however you get your podcasts, definitely rate us and subscribe if you haven't already. And also reach out to us on social media if you have any ideas of any podcasts that you want to listen to in terms of topics, next pods. We'd love to get that in the queue for you and even talk to you about how we can make the podcast better. But glad you were able to tune in as a listener today. We are going to be subbing out for now. Catch you on the next one.